Hello and welcome back to Big Nostalgia. I am Phil.
I am Vicky.
And this is the podcast where we take a game from the past, specifically one that we grew up with. We analyse it, we look at why it came to be, how it was developed, what quirks it's got, how it was designed, and then we go on to look at its legacy, i.e. sequels, critical reception, but most importantly, more important than any of those things, is what we think of it now. Has it aged well in our eyes? So this week, we're looking at I'm not going to bury the lead. It's a game. I was going to say what I thought of it, but that's skipping.
You're skipping ahead. Let's just introduce it. Pikmin, the original Pikmin.
The original Pikmin 1. Although, for clarity, I should say that we've only ever played the Wii re-release, which was added the motion controls in. I've played a little bit of the original GameCube version, which maybe I'll touch on when we do talk about it. But Vicky, tell me about Pikmin.
Well, Pikmin came out on the GameCube in October 2001, and on the Wii, specifically the new Play Control bit of the Wii, into February 2009. It was created and produced by Shigeru Miyamoto and directed by Shifumi Hino and Masami Abe, who, in fact, were the directors and helped create 1080 Snowboarding. Out of all the games to choose some directors from, that's a pretty... Because 1080 Snowboarding, I always thought was kind of like one of those off games. It was never mainstream, but I think it had a few followers more than I knew of, really.
I think it did have its fan base. And I think we may have said at the time, like, 1080 Snowboarding, in a certain way, feels like a third-party game, not a Nintendo game. But possibly just because it wasn't all bright and colourful. It was like an actual serious sports simulation game rather than... It's not... You know, it didn't look like a Nintendo game because Mario wasn't on the snowboard. They actually tried to give it a proper going.
It did. I found it funny in my research that, of course, so many people... I say so many people. The director... and the programmer from 1080 Snowboarding came onto this project. When you think of 1080 Snowboarding being, as you said, more realistic, as a simulator, and then you've got Pikmin, which is, by some people's memes, fluffy and light and very misleading in that fact, because it's actually a lot harder than it looks. But I just thought it was interesting, out of all the different gaming backgrounds to have, that was their main one that they were successful for. So... It was produced as well by, obviously, Shigeru Miyamoto and Hiroki Kimura. The original idea of it was that there was two characters in a prehistoric world, and the player would play God. So you weren't actually in control of the two characters. You would overlook, you could get them to like either get along or fight, but you were kind of in a God mode, as it were. And this game was called Adam and Eve. So you could make children, you could fight historic animals, and the bulbers, the big ones from Pikmin.
Oh, the Bulborbs.
The Bulbors. They originally were, in programming, they were the mammoths in the prehistoric world that would attack, of course, the humans and create trouble for them. Then the foundation of the Pikmin technology was animation agency of the multitude of interacting characters. So, of course, they had this concept of this prehistoric world, and then along came Super Mario 128 at the Nintendo Space World of 2000, which I'm sure a lot of people know about, that just to make everyone aware, it showed 128 Marios all interacting with each other, taking apart this giant pixel on stage. And the whole premise of showing it was to show you could have that many characters in a program on the screen at one time. And that really had an influence on the way that the story was going. So Shigeru Miyamoto, it kind of turned his head from the whole prehistoric, and he thought more about having the number of people on the screen and what that could influence as gameplay. Although there was some initial development trouble, The development team of Pikmin expressed their initial trouble finding the game's direction. Hino explains, I still can clearly recall the first time that I saw multiple Pikmin working together to carry a big opponent. Until then, we have been struggling to find a direction for the game should have, but when these carry actions were completed, we were able to determine the future of Pikmin. So it actually really influenced the whole working together, the team element, and having, like, of course, a leader to direct them rather than, of course, them all for their own gain.
Yeah.
Of course, if you are a big fan of Pikmin, which I hope you are because you're listening to this, you all know the general story, but I will cover it in this as well. The goal, of course, of Pikmin, you are Olimar, you've landed on landed being an open concept. You've crash landed on a planet and you need to find your dolphin ship. You need to find all the pieces, and then, of course, you meet these creatures that inhabit the planet, the Pikmin, and you find out that you can control them in your quest to find your Pikmin, your parts of your ship. Obviously, the onions make more Pikmin, and of course, how many ship parts determine the ending of the story, which I always thought was an interesting concept, because when I first played this through on the Wii version, I think I got the worst ending possible. I got the bad ending.
I think I did as well.
I didn't do very well, and then you're just like, oh. And I think it took me a while. I think it took me to actually look into the game, not for this, but just through curiosity, to find, like, there's a perfect happy ending. Technically, there are 3 endings. Do you want to? I'm sure you know each ending.
Well, there's the bad ending, like you just described, which, spoiler alert for Pikmin, but if you're listening to this video, you've probably played it, where you take off. Basically, Olimar's got 30 days until his. It's like basically he's got a life support system that lasts 30 days. In any other situation, that would be this horrific thing, but it's just kind of all cutesy and colourful. But at the end of day 30. Regardless, Olimar will try and take off. If you don't have the right number of parts, if you don't have the right parts, because there are mandatory parts and optional parts, you will come crashing back down to Earth. And then in a very creepy scene, which again, in any other setting would be very disturbing, which is still disturbing, is that the ship crashes and the Pikmin take Olimar and put him into an onion, and he gets planted as a Pikmin.
One of us.
The irony being that without Olimar there, no one's ever going to pluck him out of the ground. Then you have the normal, the bland end, the normal ending. Like, you've got all
average ending, yeah.
You've got all the compulsory parts, but you haven't got all the parts. And Olimar takes off, he gets into orbit, and the game just kind of ends. It's kind of almost like a womp womp. Well, you did it, but womp womp.
You did it, but not to the degree that you could have done it. But congratulations, you didn't die.
Yeah, and I think Olimar has maybe a little thing at the end of text being like, well, damn, I had to leave some stuff behind. And then you got, like, the perfect ending, which is all 30 parts in 30 days or less, where the Pikmin all kind of line up and see him off. And this is still, like, the core speculation, but the thing, whilst Olimar is exiting the unknown planet, I put unknown in quotes because it's heavily implied to be Earth, and that becomes more prominent as the series goes on. He looks out the window and sees all these multicoloured onions for, like, Pikmin colours that have never been in the games either, like orange, like bluey green kind of stuff, black. Well, black, you end up getting the rock Pikmin.
But I do find that a really interesting concept, because it obviously shows that the development team wanted to go further with the Pikmin concept. And as we know, having Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 3, they have now developed the amount of Pikmin. Now, of course, Pikmin, the base colours, obviously, are red, yellow and blue. That's all you get in Pikmin 1. But there is another Pikmin in Pikmin 1 that you cannot control. Do you know what it is?
It's the Poison Pikmin.
Yeah, the mushroom Pikmin, under the control of the Puffstool, who obviously you cannot control, but they can be a bit of a dick, really.
Yeah,
to
just a
put it
pain.
mildly. Just a pain. But, and then when talking, I don't want to go too much into the different colours of the Pikmin, because, of course, that's something I'll be able to go into more detail come Pikmin 2. But, of course, red means that they're impervious to fire. Yellow, they can get thrown higher and can pick up explosives. And of course, blue is water. Yellow, I don't believe so. In this one, it's electric. Does it start from the beginning of being impervious to electric?
No, electric isn't a hazard in Pikmin 1.
I didn't think so, no. But I thought that was an interesting development of the Pikmin.
And also, like, it's in, well, we can discuss the evolving functions of the Pikmin as we go into, like, Pikmin 2. But just looking at Pikmin 1, like, the reds are a bit stronger. The yellows can have the different throwing arc. Like you say, they go higher. And the blues can go through water. And I think for the first game, that kind of gives you enough variations. Because there's points in the game where you have to do blues to do this, then yellows to get up there, then reds to take it, go through the fire and things like that. So it works into the design very well.
I do feel for the first game, and definitely as we've been able to see, obviously, where the game progresses, that having the 3 usable Pikmin is enough. I think if they had like 5 or 6, it would just been too many. This game was more about introducing the world, introducing the characters, and introducing the concept of Pikmin. Whereas once that's been introduced, that's something that you can always develop on. Definitely when you get to Pikmin 3, you've got 3 captains, and of course Pikmin 2 you have 2 captains. It's a lot more. It's better to have the bigger variety of Pikmin to use. Whereas in this, with just Olimar, you don't need more. Definitely for the hazards that you find. And, my favourite part of the game, the time limit. God damn it.
Like you say, it's a 30-day time limit. So possibly, because the thing is, like, you don't get more than one onion introduced in more than one day. So that's already, like, especially for a first-time player, that's like, your first day is getting equipped with the reds. Then you got another day where you get, like, to fill with the yellows. And, like, the blue. Like, you'd end up being on, like, day 10 before you finish introducing Pikmin types if you're not careful. Which, for a day... I think the game kind of has enough there to, like, hit what it wants to do. Which I think makes it... To be fair, I don't think there's anything wasted in Pikmin. I think it very, very succinctly is like, this is a time-based game where you need to do a set amount of tasks with these resources. Get to it.
Talking about the time base, so of course you've got 30 days. Each day is approximately 17 minutes spent in normal time. And of course the idea is collect all your parts, get your Pikmin safe. At the end of the day, you need to get everyone back in the onions, and anyone you leave behind or gets left gets eaten by any of the creatures on the planet. And he does his little kind of like little diary at the end of the day as well.
Yeah.
Apparently, if you lost all your Pikmin in a day, his diary entry is like proper emo, just like, how could I have let this happen? I'm a horrible captain. Why would they follow me?
Yeah. He just, like, woe is me.
But I thought it was an interesting concept, and I mean, that's the main premise of the Pikmin game, is that you had this limitation of the time. A bit like, it does make me think of Majora's Mask, with the 3-day limitation, and of course, the things that you learn to make that longer, and what you have to get done in those sort of days. So, and I think that's what I had. That's why I got the very bad ending my first play round, because to get the 25 parts in 30 days is doable, but the first playthrough, I still get my head around the controls. I found this game very challenging, and I personally, I feel certain Pikmins after do it better. But we will go into that at the end, because now I want to talk to you about locations. Can you name all the locations in Pikmin 1?
The landing site or the crash site?
Yep.
The Forest of Hope.
Yep.
The Forest Navel.
Yep, which is a weird name.
Because he said it looked like a belly button.
Yeah, I know.
Which, again, is weird.
Yeah.
The Distant Spring.
Yep.
And the Final Trial.
Yep. 5 areas. I thought that they developed very well in the hardness and the fact that you can go back to old areas to find bits that you might not be able to get the first time round because of the Pikmin you had. So they integrate very well into each other. Again, for the first version of this game, they didn't need to make any better. Definitely bigger if you think of the time constraint of the 30 days as well. If they had made it even bigger, you would have actually spent more time on Pikmin, more time on locations, and less time actually finding stuff. You'd spend all your time exploring.
Also, it's very kind of neat that it's like 30 parts, 30 days. And like, even when you hear that, when I first heard that, I was like, cool, just like a part a day. But like, then your first playthrough, all of a sudden you're like, oh my god,
God.
Yeah, just getting to that one part a day becomes like a challenge. And then it's one of those games that as you become better at it, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I can hit those 3 parts today. And,
Yeah,
like,
3
you can
parts
start
in one day
optimising it.
rather than one, and getting stuff closer and getting rid of enemies. I think the more you play, the better you get.
Yeah. And you just learn, because it's always like this, they're always in the same places each time, and you know the setup, so you can just kind of try different strategies and see what works. One of the things they put into the Wii version that wasn't in the GameCube version is the ability to go back to previous days, which I think is... Because if you had a day that went just truly horrible, it's good to be like, oh, I'll just go back and I'll just try that day again. Now I know what I know now. And it is the kind of thing where you can optimise and be like, oh, if I do this differently, if I try this, it's very much a game that lends itself to replay and like iterations of strategies.
Definitely. It kind of really challenges the person to think outside the box and to consider in its environment, and even like prioritise certain, if you think, right now I've grown like, I don't know, 20 yellow ones, I'm going to prioritise getting this bit today while growing extra red ones. It's a lot of forward thinking. So the soundtrack in the game, what did you think? Were you a fan?
I think it's mostly just like quite light, and outside of like boss themes and stuff, it's usually quite light environmental music, which kind of suits. I think if they had something that was very high tempo, you just feel on edge the entire time. So reserving like the heavy instruments and like the faster pace for actual like boss fights and stuff, just having the like melodic music instead just really just helps you kind of, even though you've got a time pressure, you can kind of enjoy it a bit more, in my opinion.
Well, the composer, Hajime Waki, he really wanted to make it an environment to do just that, so you could really focus on the gameplay, as there was such a constraint with the 30 days. He also wanted it to feel very natural, as of course most of the area and all of the areas are outside in nature, and the Pikmin themselves are animals that Olimar finds in nature. The music in the Pikmin series accompanies every part of the game, from ambient music during gameplay and the menus to pre-rendered cutscene scores to minor jingles for small events. The style is quite unique and extremely varied across the game, featuring many different instruments and textures that reflect the game's environments on the PN4-404 and beyond. Most notably, much of the music is dynamic. Gameplay events and parameters can add and subtract elementals from the music. For example, entering a combat will bring a new intense percussion track into the mix, and the passage of sunset thins the music down to a quiet, peaceful rendition. Bosses in the game have their own themes, and non-canonical game modes, such as challenge mode or bingo battle, have a different, less serious composition style to reflect the different structure and style of the gameplay. So everything was thought for the gameplay and the biggest effect it'd have on the person playing it, which I thought was quite a rounded way of... I thought it was very well integrated.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier how you and me have only ever played on the new Play Control version of this game compared to, of course, the GameCube version. Now, you mentioned one of the differences. What was the difference you mentioned?
That you could reload previous days.
Yes. So, of course, that's something that they added to make it a bit more functional. But some more of the differences is that as Olimar, you could call from a greater distance to your Pikmin. You weren't as restricted as you were in the first one. The yellow Pikmin keep bombs when dropped. So if you they weren't under your control anymore, in the GameCube version, they just dropped the bombs where they landed and you kind of in trouble, whereas of course in the Wii version they held onto their bombs, which made it a lot more handier, and the Pikmin lasted longer when on fire or drowning, to give you more time to save those poor Pikmin from their dreadful fate. She says while giggling because she's a horrible person.
And to be fair, that allows for a bit more, I think there's a bit more ability to sequence break and like do skips and glitches and stuff in the Wii version as a result of all that.
And it also, the best way I found when researching not just this game but quite a few games for our channel, that a game can become better is when they really research the old game, listen to some of the critiques and just make them better. They don't have to be big deals. They don't have to be mind-shaking changes. It can be as simple as just letting the Pikmin survive a bit longer. It just gives you that bit more time.
Well, especially back in the days before patches and things like that, you know, how you released a game was how it was. Apart from maybe regional variations, if like, oh, it's not coming out in the US for a few months, so we've got a chance to make these few tweaks. But, you know, it was a chance to like maybe patch some stuff that maybe their feedback after like big release was able to feed back to them. Actually, these things need to be a bit different.
Definitely. So comes the part that is always my favourite, quirks. Now, I've been very careful with what I have found quirk-wise because, of course, when researching this, a lot of quirks came up for Pikmin 2, Pikmin 3, and even Pikmin Bloom, which is a new
mobile game.
I checked it out because I was researching this. I checked it out. It is weird. And it's basically like Pokemon Go, and I didn't like it at all. But
it wouldn't... this is a very, very off-piece gripe. It wouldn't let me... It wanted me to get yet another step counting app for my phone because it could only do it through the Google one or something, because obviously it's all based on steps and then you get Pikmin from it.
Yeah.
I've already got one because I've got a Garmin watch, and it just annoyed me that I collect my steps all day on here. I don't always have my phone on me. Like, I just wanted to be able to just play the game with my the watch I've got, and then, you know, use the steps to progress in the game, whatever. Yeah. But I was like, I'm not downloading yet another sports app just so I can play this game.
So my bit was I don't have my internet on my phone when I'm outside the house. I don't have unlimited data. So, of course, it's something that relies quite heavily on you always having your internet on and them knowing your location all the time. And I was just like, I just wanted to play a Pikmin game. I didn't really... And it just did remind me of the Pokemon Go, but with steps. So, anyway, that aside, one of the things that was shown was the inconsistency with the Pikmin strength throughout the games. So, of course, the purple Pikmin are supposed to they're supposed to be able to carry 10 grams because they're 10 times stronger than, say, a non-purple one. But a non-purple one can only carry 1 grams. Doesn't add up in the game. If you think about certain objects that they have to carry, and this is
purple
evidence.
Pikmin are only in Pikmin 2 though, right?
Yeah, but this is consistent.
Oh, just an example.
Within the red ones and the yellow ones, they're all. It's not consistent throughout any of the games.
Oh,
the weight that they're able to carry.
Yeah, because is that what it's meant to be? Is those numbers meant to be like grams?
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that. I suppose that makes sense because the biggest thing... Oh, we'll get to Pikmin 2. But the biggest thing requires 100 purples.
Yeah. So, I thought that was interesting. And of course, Olimar, this leads into Olimar, is less than 35 grams himself. Olimar may look fairly similar to a human in terms of his anatomy, but there are some key differences, the most notable of which is his height. According to the manual of the original game, the Hockatan... Hockatanitan?
Well, it's Hockate, I think, is... So it's Hockatation?
Hockatation is around 3/4 of an inch tall. Not only does this make Olimar shortest character in the Super Smash Bros. Series, a title that has previously been held by Kirby, but also makes him incredibly light. Although a canon weight has never been provided for Olimar, it's possible to get a rough idea through his adventure with the Pikmin. It takes 4 or 5 regular Pikmin to carry him depending on the game, which gives them the ability to carry between 4 or 7 grams each, would mean Olimar can weigh no more than 35 grams. He is not quite as light as a feather, but it does explain how the game's puffy blowhole enemy is able to blow Olimar away so effortlessly.
Yeah, because he is literally just like tiny. Like, it's a good thing that
tiny and light.
It's a good thing that Smash Bros doesn't have all the characters in there to scale.
Yeah, I know, right?
You just get stepped on in the game.
Game over. Why would you play as Olimar? Or like him like falling in someone's ear and just like messing with their brain.
Yeah, going in there with his Pikmin and just like on your brain, like throwing his Pikmin.
And they're just kind of like groping the size of the brain. Anyway,
That's
of
a
course,
weird image we've just painted
it's
there.
a really weird image. Of course, Olimar's ship in Pikmin 1 is named Dolphin. Of obviously due to the Nintendo's GameCube codename was Dolphin. Most people obviously already know this, but although it was eventually renamed, reference to the codename can still be found in several Nintendo titles. These include Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Super Bros. Super Smash Bros. Melee, and Pikmin. In the later game, Dolphin is the name given to Olimar's ship. And the appearance of the ship varies depending on how many of ship parts the player has collected, with the two lights in the front being the most obvious differences. The flight pattern of the Dolphin also changes as more parts are located. Once completed, its final form greatly resembles the ship shown to us using the Wii U's transfer tool.
Yes.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, because the lights on the front go from, I think, off to red to amber to green throughout the game.
There is, we mentioned locations earlier. The Forest Naval's lakes are actually based on a real-world place. It's called Rimstone Dams, and it's in New Mexico. And the formations of the rocks are very unique to the area, and that's where they took inspiration for that level.
Huh.
The Puffstall enemy appears, out of all the places to appear, they appear in Legend of Zelda Minish Cap.
Okay.
I did not know that.
No, that's one of my Zelda games I've never played.
To be fair, never played it myself either. Definitely wanted to give it a try. But yeah, they're enemy in that game. Out of all the ones to be in. And of course, the word Pikmin is derived. The idea was, of course, the idea of pick me. It was the two words pick me into Pikmin. That's where the name came from.
Oh.
Same with Olimar's name. Because of Super Mario 128.
Yeah, 128.
128. Because of that inspiration, Olimar's name is actually an anagram of the word Mario.
In Japanese?
In Japanese, yes.
Because there's no L in Mario in English.
No, in Japanese it is.
Yeah. But
that's where his name came from, because of the inspiration of the Mario, Super Mario 128. Originally, the Pikmin were going to be different due to sizes rather than colour. They were all black, and there were some really big ones, some really small ones, but they found that it was easier in production to give them a colour differential rather than a size differential, just because it was easier to render as a game.
And also, I'm guessing, like, for kids and stuff as well, probably easier.
A bit more brighter, engaging.
Yeah. And also, you know, you won't know whether that's a big Pikmin or whether he's just close to the camera.
Yeah, that's true. As I've mentioned before, Olimar has appeared, obviously, in Super Smash Bros., but he appeared in Super Smash less than 1 month after Pikmin's release. So he's obviously already a character in line for that game before his game was released. So regardless how well it went, he was going to be in that Super Smash.
He wasn't a playable fighter though till Brawl, which was 2007, 2008. So I'm guessing he was a trophy.
Although Olimar would not become playable in Super Smash Bros. Until Brawl, his first appearance in the series actually came many years earlier in Melee. He features as a trophy in the game, although the only way to unlock it is by having Pikmin saved on the memory card. Interestingly, this is the only time in history of Super Smash Bros. When a trophy has been unlocked using this method.
Yeah.
Because, of course, most of the time you just gain trophies. You don't have to own the game to get the trophy related to it. Also, subsequent titles have included significantly more Pikmin-related trophies, with each Pikmin having their own trophy in Brawl. There are also trophies for many of the game's enemies, as well as Pikmin 2, other playable characters such as Louie and the President. When Pikmin 1 first came out, there was an idea that there was going to be a 2-playable mode in Pikmin 1 game, because there's an unused map for 2 players in Pikmin 1. However, I believe the reason behind it was they did not have the mechanics collected to this game. And also, I don't think they needed it for Pikmin 1. I think Pikmin 1, as it was kind of like a starter game of the series, it made much more sense to stay one player. And that's something they've been able to develop in Pikmin 2 and, of course, Pikmin 3.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
So, you know the whistle that dear old Olimar uses at the end of the day? Or whenever he wants to get Pikmin to come near or do what he wants them to round them up.
Yep.
The whistle was inspired by Japanese farming areas who use certain songs to identify the end of the day.
Huh.
So, of course, in a big old farming area in Japan, you've got loads of people working the field. Certain, people to tell them it was the end of the shift would use certain songs to make a group of people aware of the same fact. Shigeru Miyamoto also wanted a universal sound that could be represented in all sorts of cultures. So the whistle the idea also came from like school teachers trying to get school children's attention, which he knew would be a sound that would be universally translated across boards.
Yeah, it's cool.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. Also, the Pikmin Flower?
Yes.
In Japan, they have specifically bred a flower to look like the Pikmin Flower. They took a flower that looked closest to them, called a Cindera cordata, and they bred it to look even more like the Pikmin Flower. They renamed it as a Barcopa Cabanera, but, of course, the slang term for it is the Pikmin Flower. And they actually use it as a merchandising tool.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. Just wait
Here's
until...
a flower. Looks like Pikmin.
And wait until Nintendo's like, we've added a head, legs, and a body. It's alive.
So, oh God, that's a disturbing thought. If you're careful, if you pull on it, a body comes out. Of course, earlier I mentioned about how when the Pikmin were all working together for one goal, it inspired them to make that sort of game. They also were very interested in the GameCube C-stick of the design of the GameCube controller, and this inspired the throwing technique of the Pikmin.
Yeah, because a game like Pikmin, I don't know, possibly because we only ever played it on the Wii, but it always struck me as like a game that would actually be pretty good with a mouse and keyboard. Because most games like that are point and click, click, go over here, click, go over here, and you kind of get that a bit more of the Wii version because you're pointing and clicking.
Rather than a little controller of the GameCube version.
Yeah, trying to do the two analog sticks in tandem always seemed like it'd be really difficult, but I've never really had that much experience with it to try.
It's definitely interesting how they've developed the game for, of course, the new console. I mean, I feel Pikmin was a little bit ahead of its time in the whole concept, and Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 3, and of course revamping it on the new controller plus means that they've been able to develop it in even more into the game that they were hoping to do with the limitations of the GameCube.
Yeah.
So, how many games were sold? So, in the first week, Pikmin sold more than 101,000 copies. However, sales fell to only between 10 and 15,000 copies in the weeks following. Following the release of A No Ultra by Strawberry Flower, an image song related to Pikmin, its sale recovered slightly to about 22,000 copies in a week. The song appeared in Japanese commercials for the game, but soon became an unexpected hit song, eventually eclipsing the Pikmin sales. In the weeks of the 24th of December 2001 and January 6th, 2002, Pikmin sold approximately 53,000 copies and 102 copies respectively. To date, Pikmin has sold at least 1.19 million copies worldwide, 680,000 in the United States, and 507,000 in Japan. By January the 3rd, 2010, the Wii version of the Pikmin had sold 169,000 copies in Japan. Since its release, Pikmin has developed a vocal and devoted fan base, which I think is true. But I did find it funny how the song did better than the actual game. It outsold the copies out of all the things that happen.
And I think the song is in every Smash Brothers Brawl onwards as well. It's one of the tracks you can use on Pikmin stages.
Also, I believe it's in Pikmin 2, if you have 20 of each Pikmin out at the same time and leave them to it, they will start singing that song.
Yeah. Well, even if you're just like walking around with like 20 of each, they'll just be humming it.
Yeah. So, of course, the song was very popular. But I do feel that this is a game potentially not to start off with. I mean, it was received very well. In E3 2001 was a positive reaction. Games Critics Best Puzzle Trivial Parlor Game. It was an 89 out of 100 in Metacritic. It's very well received, but I do feel that this is a game that has become better with time. It's a very interesting concept when it first came out, and compared to other games that came out at the same time, it wasn't a Mario game. It wasn't following the same sort of, Save the Princess or anything like that. It was more of a unique concept.
Yeah.
Definitely a standalone, because Majora's Mask had that time element, but it had the backing of being a Legend of Zelda game, whereas this was a brand new concept as well.
Yeah, it's a brand new IP. It was kind of a survival game without being dark. It was kind of a time-based strategy game without being on PC. It was this, it was very unique, kind of conceptually. And I think, we can chat as we go as to how we think the series is on. I definitely think the series, we're not covering Pikmin 3, so I can say that I think Pikmin 3 is the best Pikmin game, because it is the one that brings everything closest. Yeah, it kind of realises the concept to the fullest, in my opinion, of all of them. Although we'll get into Pikmin 1 versus Pikmin 2, I'm sure, as we go through this series. Also, the fact that Pikmin has kind of grown as it's gone has just made me very disappointed that the Pikmin 3 re-release on Switch wasn't a trilogy collection, because that would have been a perfect way to get people into it. Yeah.
Because then you could have played all the way from the first one. I think I'd be more inclined to get it if it had been a trilogy.
Yeah.
And you would be able to see the development of it as well. There's so many good trilogy collections. That was definitely a missed part on Nintendo. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next week, releasing the trilogy edition of Pikmin. Bloody hell.
Okay, let's record another footnote. But it's just, I think my favourite way to play Pikmin is in Pikmin 3 with the touchscreen on my lap and a Wii remote and nunchuck, because you literally get this like eagle-eye view on your lap of the whole thing, which makes it really convenient.
Well, when, of course, discussing these games, which games to use, we were in discussion of which one is better, Pikmin 1 or Pikmin 2. Obviously, we'll go more into Pikmin 2 and Pikmin 2's video, but I can definitely say in this one that I do prefer Pikmin 2 to Pikmin 1. Pikmin 1 was a great start of a series. I think it brought in a lot of key elements, but some of the problems it had were dealt with in the new Control Plus, but I do feel that quite a lot of them obviously couldn't be dealt with because they're either due to storyline or time restraint or whatever, and I just feel in the later games they deal with certain elements a lot better than Pikmin 1. Now, I don't hold it against Pikmin 1 because it was the first in the series and it really opened the door. As I said, is a unique concept when it first came out, definitely as a standalone series, which we know Nintendo do like their follow-ons such as the Mario collection and the Legend of Zelda collection. So for a standalone under the Nintendo brand, it was in a way very risky, and I think it's done very well. But I just think some of the negative points, of course, said about the game was the camera angles and stuff like that, and I just feel that it was done better. Each game has brought something better, and of course you've said Pikmin 3 is your ultimate favourite. I'd still pick Pikmin 2, because by Pikmin 3 you've got so many captains. I don't enjoy that sort of gameplay, it's such a bigger area, but that's just a personal sort of thing. I can see where Pikmin 3 has even improved on Pikmin 2, and I just think it's a good progression, and it's a missed opportunity not to have the trilogy. God damn it.
Yeah.
What are your feelings on it?
Well, we could go on about how the missed opportunity of the Pikmin trilogy all day. And from looking around online, I seem to be in the real minority in that I prefer the original Pikmin to Pikmin 2, because I think I'll make one thing very perfectly clear, is that Pikmin 1, even on the Wii, is janky as hell. Like, there are certain, like, you can accidentally fall out the map if you do certain glitches. And, like, certain things are just kind of a bit broken or a bit busted. And there's certain things where if it happens in certain ways and the game decides to have a hiccup, you're just best off just restarting the day. But it kind of goes back to, and I think it echoes a lot of original versus sequel discussions. Like, it echoes, in my opinion, Banjo-Kazooie versus Banjo-Tooie, Portal versus Portal 2. In my opinion, Pikmin is the better game because there's nothing that doesn't need to be there. It's just a very tight, discrete experience. You do 30 days, you optimise it as much as possible with very fixed parameters. We'll get on to Pikmin 2, but Pikmin 2 I found, whilst it added a lot of interesting stuff, also added a lot of stuff which I don't like so much. So on balance, I find that if you want to inject Pikmin in its purest form into your veins, you inject the original Pikmin. And then I find that Pikmin 3 kind of brings both Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2 together into like a good balance.
Definitely some interesting concepts there. I feel that this is something that, as we are covering Pikmin 2, I feel that this is something that we're going to kind of go back to again. So I think we should leave it there for today. But yeah, definitely an interesting game. What did you think of Pikmin 1? Did you prefer it to Pikmin 2? And even, we wouldn't hold you against mentioning dear old Pikmin 3, even though we won't be covering it. And yeah, I've really enjoyed researching this game, as even though it's personally not my favourite one out of the collection, it's still a very unique sort of game, and I just thought they did really, really well with it.
So, and if you want to hear us talk about Pikmin 2, well, you're in luck, because that's next week's episode.
Please join us again for that.
Yep. So while sometimes we like to split up different series, because these two episodes, because some of the stuff that Vicky's covered does cover both games, it didn't seem worth it to have them on different seasons or different. We would just be repeating ourselves. So think of this is like the main course, and you'll join us next week for dessert, which is pick carrots.
Even though, of course, the games are quite similar in self-regard, unlike the Wii Play and the Wii Sport, I didn't think there was enough. They're both quite chunky games. I thought there was enough information on both to do them as two separate ones. So yeah, please join us for that. Definitely if you're a Pikmin fan, or just because you want to listen to us some more, which we really appreciate.
Yes. No, it's been great to be talking about Pikmin. I wanted to do a video on Pikmin for a long, long time, so I've been very excited for this.
Please follow us on all our bits and pieces.
ABK Studios.
Yep.
It's you're watching this on YouTube, so we've got our channel which you can subscribe to. You've got Twitter, which is also ABK Studios with no space. Those are the main ones, really, to be quite honest. If we're doing updates midweek, we'll be doing them there. Or if we get enough subscribers, we'll unlock that community tab on YouTube, which would be even more convenient. So that's your hint to subscribe at this point.
Subscribe.
And we will see you next week for more Pikmin.
I've been Vicky.
I've been Phil.
And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Bye. Bye.